It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Ukraine at a crossroads. President Zelensky under pressure to sanction a U.S. peace plan which leans towards Russian demands.
Ukraine may be facing an extremely difficult decision, either a loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner.
Well, he'll have to like it, and if he doesn't like it, then, they should just keep fighting, I guess.
Keeping us guessing, the Prime Minister refuses 12 times to rule out manifesto-breaking tax hikes in next week's budget.
I just want to say on record now, you are not recommitting to that today, are you?
Well, it's only a matter of days now to the budget.
Okay.
We will set out our plans in that budget.
Jailed for more than 10 years, the former Welsh reform leader who took bribes to make pro-Russian speeches. Foes appear as friends. Donald Trump and the incoming New York mayor seem to put their differences aside at the White House. Cold comfort. Millions of households are set to see higher energy bills this winter, despite wholesale costs falling. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Volodymyr Zelensky said tonight that Ukraine faces one of the hardest moments in its history as he faces increasing pressure to sign up to a U.S. peace plan which feels like a surrender to Russia. President Trump's 28-point plan effectively gives Vladimir Putin much of what he wants, nearly 4 years after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Russian president has expressed his openness to the proposals, while President Zelensky says Ukraine faces a choice between losing a major partner or its dignity. Whatever happens, Donald Trump says Kyiv will have to approve the peace plan. He wants a deal by Thanksgiving, which is next Thursday. Our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn reports.
It is the day when Ukrainians honour those who fought to make their country independent and free. In suitably grim weather, President Zelensky and his First Lady did so knowing it is now threatened, like never before. As he laid out in no uncertain terms, a turning point is approaching for Ukraine, but also the entire Western alliance.
Зараз один з найважчих моментів нашої історії.
This is one of the hardest moments in our history. The pressure on Ukraine today is among the heaviest we have ever faced. Currently, Ukraine may be facing an extremely difficult decision, either a loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner.
Donald Trump has swung his weight behind a plan that effectively takes Russian demands and presents them as peace proposals. They add up to little more than a surrender ultimatum for Ukraine, but far from backing down, the president was today setting a deadline for Ukraine's compliance.
We have, I've had a lot of deadlines, but if things are working well, you tend to extend the deadlines. But Thursday is, we think, an appropriate time.
The plan has 28 points. They include handing territory to Russia it has taken by force in Crimea and the Donbass, and land it's fought and failed so far to seize. In the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, land would be divided along current military lines. There would be demilitarized zones, and Russia would give up small pockets of land it's taken. The Ukrainian military would be neutered, more than halved in size, limited to 600,000 personnel. Ukraine would be forever barred from joining NATO. But it's this proposal doing the most damage to the Western alliance that talks between Russia and NATO would be mediated by the United States, which is meant to be its founding and strongest partner, not an outside arbitrator. $100 billion in frozen Russian assets would be used for Ukraine's reconstruction, but only in such a way that America can profit from it. The plan has blindsided allies. They are struggling to keep up. Britain's Prime Minister choosing to ignore the obvious truth about this plan, that there is now a massive gulf between Europe and America.
We all want a just and lasting peace. That's what the President of America wants. That's what we all want. And so we need to work from where we are to that end. But the principle that Ukraine must determine its future under its sovereignty is a fundamental principle.
Europe's Foreign Affairs Supremo, Kaja Kallas, was more blunt.
Russia has no legal right whatsoever to any concessions from the country it invaded. Ultimately, the terms of any agreement are for Ukraine to decide.
But with America now threatening to take military weapon support and, crucially, military intelligence away, Ukraine would be blind in the face of Russian attacks if it does not comply. Unsurprisingly, in Moscow, Putin was giving the plan an understated welcome.
I too believe it could form the basis for a final peace settlement. But this text is not being discussed with us in any substantive way, and I can assume why. I believe the reason is the same. The US administration has so far been unable to secure the consent of the Ukrainian side. Ukraine is against it.
This is the week that more than 30 Ukrainian civilians were killed by Russian drones, among them several children. While Ukraine burns, America's sympathies in this conflict lie clearly with Moscow. If Russia is allowed to keep land, it is taken by force and imposed terms via American negotiators. The freedom that Ukraine has fought to defend for all of us is potentially in grave peril. Frantic diplomacy is underway to deflect Donald Trump again. But this time, his intentions seem clearer than ever. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
And in the past hour, President Trump has said Volodymyr Zelensky will have to like this US-backed plan to bring peace to Ukraine.
President Zelensky said today that his country would risk either giving up a partner or giving up its dignity. There's been criticism that this deal...
You mean he doesn't like it?
It's unclear. He was sort of
pretending... He'll have to like it, and if he doesn't like it, then, they should just keep fighting, I guess,
The suggestion that he made, though, was that if he doesn't accept it, that the U.S. would pull back its support for Ukraine.
Well, at some point he's going to have to accept something. He hasn't accepted. You remember right in the Oval Office not so long ago, I said, you don't have the cards. Don't forget, I inherited this war. This war never would have happened. I inherited this war. And I thought he should have made a deal a year ago, 2 years ago. The ultimate deal would have been if it never started. That would have been the good deal. That could have been done, too, if you had the right president, but you didn't have the right president.
Let's go live to Washington and speak to our U.S. correspondent, Mark Stone. And Mark, pretty strong words there. Zelensky is going to have to like it because he doesn't have the cards.
Yeah, very significant words from President Trump, and the first time we've heard on camera his reaction or his kind of ownership of this plan. I mean, remember, this is a plan that was drawn up by, as far as we know, and it hasn't been explicit, but the two envoys, the two trusted individuals who are not diplomats from Russia and from the United States, the friends of the principles, the friend of Putin and the friend of Trump. These are the people who've drawn up this proposal. But now Trump appears to be owning it as well. So that is significant. Look, I think it is still a live document. That is how the administration here behind the scenes has been describing it. So it is subject to change. But I get a sense that we have a clear indication now from the Americans of the way that they want this to go, which is clearly not in the favor of Ukraine. What it is a quick deal, the sort that Donald Trump has always been seeking. And that short term might be a good thing because it will stop the killing. Long term, it puts Europe, it certainly puts Ukraine, so the Europeans believe, in great peril. I think where we are now is there going to be a weekend of frantic European negotiations behind the scenes. Many of the principals are at the G20 in South Africa. There is a side meeting going to take place there. They will try and effectively get their ducks in order and once again come up with a united attempt to persuade Donald Trump not to allow or to force Ukraine to capitulate. So a weekend of negotiations, and then next week we'll see where we are.
And with the latest from Washington, Mark, thank you. Well, as we were just hearing there from Mark, discussion of the Trump-Ukraine plan is expected to dominate the sidelines of the G20 summit in Johannesburg, which the U.S. president is boycotting. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is among leaders who've arrived, but pressing issues here at home are on his mind as well. Speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, he refused to rule out manifesto-busting tax rises in next week's budget.
Laying it all out for Keir Starmer in South Africa. This the 45th country he's set foot in since becoming Prime Minister. Salute, celebration and smiles in Johannesburg from a PM happy to swap the storms at home for the sun on the world stage. Here for the G20 summit, but domestic diplomacy his focus, meeting business leaders to drum up jobs back home.
Hello.
But this, a PM stumbling wherever he goes. One big bump for him, his blockbuster budget and the possibility of manifesto busting tax rises. So I've got your manifesto here. Will you keep your word not to increase taxes on working people? It's on page 21 in this document.
Well, we made that commitment, and obviously we'll lay out our plans at the budget, which is just a few days away now, so you'll be able to see exactly what decisions we've made. Now, obviously, we make those decisions against a very difficult backdrop.
You won't, will you?
Well, you
said that just a few days before the last budget.
You know
you
that...
You did make the commitment before the last budget.
You know that the decisions will be made and set out in full in just a few days' time. The principles will be fairness, and the three things that I'm bearing down above all else is protecting our public services, the NHS, cutting our debt, which is vitally important, and dealing with the cost of living crisis.
Prime Minister, you won't rule out tax rises, you won't repeat your commitment not to raise taxes on working people. Freezing tax thresholds beyond 2028.
All I've said is we will set out our plans.
It's going to hurt
Wednesday.
working people, isn't it? Freezing tax thresholds.
Just
Your
that we've
Chancellor
made.
said in last year's budget, freezing the thresholds will hurt working people. She's right, isn't she? I'm not asking you about the budget. I'm just asking you if it would hurt working people.
We are going to set out our decisions. We will have absolutely in mind that the cost of living is the number one issue for people across the country.
It's working people.
No. I have in my mind. I have in my mind's eye people who are struggling with cost of living, who can't necessarily make ends meet.
The Prime Minister's refusal to recommit to promises made in this manifesto matters because this is what he told voters in 2024 at the election. And when trust is so low in politics, breaking promises, well, it carries risk. But there's a bigger question for Keir Starmer too on leadership. He promised to be the change. He promised to protect working people. He promised to end the chaos. And now he looks like he's on very shaky ground. PM, you promised to end the chaos when you were elected, but since the summer we've had winter fuel U-turn, welfare U-turn, Rayner's resignation, Mandelson's sacking, Andy Burnham's leadership drama, the Wes Street in number 10 showdown, pitch rolling in income tax rises only to U-turn. You haven't ended chaos, you are the chaos.
Look, every minute that we're not talking about the cost of living is a wasted minute.
But this is chaos.
But at the same time, we have delivered free childcare for children between 9 months and 4 years. That's a game changer for children when they're in their education.
Do you acknowledge?
And for parents.
Do you acknowledge?
Only yesterday we were rolling out the extension of free breakfast clubs. We're freezing prescription charges. We're maintaining the cap on bus fares.
So none of the none of the stuff that I've just mentioned, that you're just going to gloss over that and not acknowledge that this is chaotic.
No, I'm not. But I'm really conscious of the fact that what the majority of people want to know is, if my number one issue is paying the bills and making sure I can make ends meet, what are you doing about that? And that's why it's important for me to say these are the measures we're taking.
The PM adamant he will be driving his party into the next election, but the way ahead fraught into the budget and beyond. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Johannesburg.
And don't forget, we're going to have full coverage of the budget next Wednesday. Our special program starts at 11 a.m. with Sophie Ridge, and there will also be full analysis on the Sky News app. The former leader of Reform UK in Wales has been jailed for 10.5 years after he admitted accepting tens of thousands of pounds in cash to make pro-Russian statements to the media and to the European Parliament. The judge said Nathan Gill had abused a position of significant authority and trust and was motivated by financial and political gain. Alice Porter reports now from the Old Bailey.
It was a fall from grace for the former MEP, Nathan Gill, as he was sentenced at the Old Bailey, usually reserved for the country's most hardened criminals. In 2021, Gill was stopped at Manchester Airport on a trip to Russia. A phone seizure and home search revealed he was taking bribes as part of a pro-Russian influence campaign. The money came from Oleg Voloshin, a former Ukrainian MP who supports Russia. But the court heard Viktor Medvedchuk, a close friend of Putin, was the ultimate source of the requests and funds. Gill received around £40,000 to make pro-Russian speeches at the European Parliament and in television interviews between 2018 and 2019.
Is this a way of quieting down Viktor Medvedchuk? Is it a way of actually silencing his views? Because in the West, here in Europe, if a politician brings forward an idea, we debate that idea. We don't silence them.
The bribery was revealed in WhatsApps from Oleg Voloshin, who said, "I received all Christmas gifts and requested 5 more postcards for your kind help next week during the debate. Christmas gifts were code for money." Definitely there would be a budget for it. It will depend upon the number of MEPs we involve. But if you get 3 or 4, I will request and secure at least 5k for you.
Who is Oleg Voloshin?
No comment.
And how long have you known Oleg Voloshin?
No comment.
Gill is accused of trying to get other MEPs to push pro-Russian rhetoric. Some are believed to be British politicians. Investigations are ongoing. Reform leader Nigel Farage has previously said that he was shocked by Gill's actions, but political pressure is mounting.
To find out someone is taking bribes from the Russian state is absolutely, it's despicable. And I genuinely believe that we need reform to conduct a full investigation to weed out any Russian influence whatsoever in the party.
A statement from Reform UK said Mr Gill's actions were reprehensible, treasonous and unforgivable. We are glad that justice has been served and fully welcome the sentence Nathan Gill has received. Here at the Old Bailey, Mrs Justice Chima Grubb said that Gill had abused his position and that the harm he'd inflicted was profound. She sentenced him to 10.5 years in prison after he'd previously pleaded guilty to 8 counts of bribery. But this case goes further than one politician. It raises uncomfortable questions about the threat of Russian influence on our elected representatives.
I do believe that with some of the individuals in this case do have direct connections to Vladimir Putin, and I've no doubt that if we were able to, we could follow this trail and it would lead straight to Moscow.
It appears that Gill, a former Mormon bishop, was motivated by greed. The question now is, are there other politicians vulnerable to being manipulated by foreign powers? Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, let's speak to our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. And Tamara, have we heard anything else from Reform UK?
We have. Reform have, as you just heard there, welcomed the sentencing of Nathan Gill, saying the way he behaved was treasonous and unforgivable. Now, there have been calls from other opposition parties for an investigation into Reform's links to Russian influence and also to Russian influence in UK politics as a whole. I asked Reform if they agreed with having an investigation. I was sent a statement from Nigel Farage, who said that he would welcome an investigation into Russian and Chinese influence in British politics as a whole. Haven't had an answer to any follow-up questions about how far Reform would cooperate with that investigation or who should do it, but they say they would welcome an investigation. Now, that's been called for today by the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, who said Nigel Farage and his party are a danger to national security and called for an investigation into Russian interference. The Conservatives and indeed the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, speaking in South Africa, have called for Reform to hold an investigation into who else in the party may have links to Russian influence at all levels, and say they are concerned about the national security implications. Now, there's no suggestion Nigel Farage knew about any of this. He served with Nathan Gill as a member of the European Parliament for 6 years. He talked about how they worked closely together on the Brexit referendum. They've been pictured together celebrating the vote for Brexit. This is embarrassing for Reform, but I think we'll also put a wider spotlight on something that has been difficult for them over the last few years, which is things Nigel Farage has said about Vladimir Putin. He has described him back in 2014 as the world leader he currently most admires, although he says as an operator, not as a human being. And he's put forward an analysis of the Ukraine war, suggesting it's the West's fault for NATO expanding eastwards as recently as last year. He seems to have recently changed his tune. Only tonight he's been tweeting that the deal Donald Trump is putting forward is unacceptable if Ukraine has to give up half its army. So he seems to be shifting that position, which has been controversial with others in his party and with the British public. But there will be a new spotlight on that and, of course, claims that there may be other cases of Russian interference in British politics. I'm sure there will be questions about what kind of investigation should be held and how far reform may cooperate with it.
Tamara Cohen with the latest on that story. Tamara, thank you. Now, there's been little love lost between New York's incoming mayor, Zoran Mamdani, and President Trump, with the pair trading insults and barbed comments in recent months. But the pair came face-to-face in a meeting in the White House this evening, and it seems to have gone well.
I feel very confident that he can do a very good job. I think he is going to surprise some conservative people, actually, and some very liberal people. He won't surprise them because they already like him.
I think both President Trump and we are very clear about our positions and our views, and what I really appreciate about the president is that the meeting that we had focused not on places of disagreement, which there are many, and also focused on the shared purpose that we have in serving New Yorkers.
And I've been called much worse than a despot, so it's not that insulting.
Well, our U.S. correspondent James Matthews is at the White House. James, it could have gone very differently, but it was quite civil in the end.
Well, civil would be the word, yeah. And I think what you saw there, Barbara, is how politics works. I mean, these two are sworn political enemies. Make no mistake, Donald Trump had threatened to withhold $10 billion of federal funding if Mamdani had become New York mayor. He spoke about arresting him, deporting him. Mamdani, for his part, he talked about Trump-proofing New York City on the night that he won his election, had called him a fascist. And, he was asked about that. And I think that demonstrates the pragmatism that both clung to during this meeting, put the past behind them. And it was something, actually, of a love-in. Anybody expecting the big showdown would have found that quite the letdown. The pragmatism was based on a shared desire for improvement in New York. That's what Mamdani says that he's committed to on the basis of affordability. This is a man who won following the Trump playbook. He said to people, look, I can bring down the cost of living if you vote for me. That's how Trump won it. So in some sense, Barbara, he is a mini-Trump, but also clearly the anti-Trump. Two men clearly putting aside their clear differences. The questions in that news conference, I thought, actually were spikier than the answers. Disappointment, perhaps, for those who were looking for a Zelensky-esque spectacle. But I think in terms of the politics, both will feel elevated, perhaps, by the experience of their one-hour meeting inside the Oval Office. And certainly on the face of it, they have come together in the interests of the Big Apple.
James Matthews with the latest there outside the White House. James, thank you. Investigators say a billion-dollar money laundering network has been operating in the UK, collecting dirty cash which has gone towards Russia's war machine in Ukraine.
There's been a large quantity of cash found in the car.
Yeah. £60,000.
60,000.
There have been more than 128 arrests made across the country since the National Crime Agency launched Operation Destabilize. They've also seized £25 million in cash and cryptocurrency made from drugs, weapons and other criminal activities. A company linked to the money laundering network purchased a bank which has been facilitating payments to the Russian military. A BBC board member has resigned after criticising governance issues at the top of the corporation. The BBC says Shumit Banerjee notified the board of his resignation today. It comes after the corporation's Director General, Tim Davie, and Chief Executive of BBC News, Deborah Turness, resigned earlier this month following a row over the editing of a Panorama documentary on Donald Trump. Climate crisis talks at the COP30 summit in Brazil have overrun and look likely to stretch into the weekend. Nations have so far failed to reach an overall agreement on the crucial issues of phasing out fossil fuels and cutting carbon. 16,000 men are being invited to take part in what's being described as a game changer in diagnosing prostate cancer. A £42 million study will compare various screening methods to current NHS diagnostic processes, which can include blood tests and biopsies. And millions of households are expected to see their energy bills rise this winter. The energy regulator Ofgem has increased the current cap on prices by 0.2%, and that's despite a fall in the cost of wholesale energy. Our business and economics correspondent Paul Kelso has been investigating why.
In the first cold snap of winter, the Ebenezer Church in Bristol offers more than hope. There's a warm welcome for local families struggling with the cost of living, and a warm meal too on Fish Finger Friday. For many, the challenge of higher energy bills has never really gone away, and there's no sign of any relief as the heating goes on, as energy prices go up once more.
My wage isn't increasing, so having to stretch when costs are increasing just means you have to sacrifice other things sometimes. So that's kind of putting a little fan heater on in the living room and not having the heater on in the whole house, or wrapping up in blankets and kind of getting just warm and cosy on the sofa.
From January, we will all start paying for the construction of Sizewell C nuclear power station, £1 a month for a decade, to fund the £38 billion project. The shared cost of payments of around 6 million of the least well-off households have also been added.
The bill increases facing households from January are technically small, they're up just 0.2%. But the interesting question is why they're rising at all, because wholesale energy prices, overwhelmingly set by gas, have actually fallen 4%. Bills are being kept high by the rising cost of building and maintaining a renewable and low-carbon grid. This feels like a moment that the cost of net zero got a little more real.
Britain's national grid was built in a hurry in the 20s and 30s, connecting largely coal-fired power stations to cities. It expanded in the 50s as nuclear power came on stream, and in the 90s the dash for gas started to displace coal. But connecting new solar and offshore wind requires a new network of undersea cables and pylons, and the cost is rising. While wholesale electricity prices, set mainly by gas, have fallen from their 2022 peak to around £80 a megawatt hour, subsidies for new offshore wind have gone up and could reach £100 a megawatt hour next year. Reducing reliance on gas-fired electricity is central to the plan, but the boss of one of Europe's biggest suppliers told Sky News cutting non-power costs is the only quick fix for bills.
We have quite a lot of policy costs in our energy bills in the UK. If we remove those from energy bills and put them into general taxation, that will have a big dampening effect on energy prices. But fundamentally, it is about gas.
The government promised its Clean Power Plan would cut bills by £300, but now says consumers will have to wait.
When are energy bills going to come down?
The truth is, we do have to build that infrastructure in order to remove the volatility of fossil fuels from people's bills. We obviously hope that that will happen as quickly as possible, but there's no shortcut to this, and there's no easy solution to building the clean power system that brings down bills. And our opponents talk about gas being an alternative, but of course we would have to build new gas at huge cost as well.
Chancellor Rachel Reeves has promised to cut energy costs in the budget to ease the short-term pain of delivering long-term gain. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by PR consultant Alex Dean and The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. Welcome both. And among the issues, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Times about tonight's top story here on Sky News, the latest Ukraine peace plan. The headline, surrender land or lose U.S. support, Kyiv told. We'll be right back.